Okay, number 4, letter A. This is going to be 4A. And this is still in Activity 21, Lesson 2. The actual question itself is cosine times 1 over sine plus cosecant. And we want to simplify this. Well, the first step has been, all the time, rewrite things in terms of sine and cosine. So what we'll actually do is we write, well, cosine is already in terms of cosine and sine, so we leave that. 1 over sine is already there as well, so we leave that. However, cosecant, we'll have to do the reciprocal identity, which in fact is 1 over sine. Now from here, we're just simply going to, you have to do our order of operations. Parentheses is first, from please excuse my dear Aunt Sally or PEMDAS. So, because we already have a common denominator, we're still going to leave cosine. So we have cosine times, sine is the bottom part of my fraction, and then we just do 1 plus 1, which is 2. Of course, cosine is still cosine over 1, because now we're going to have to multiply fractions. And we multiply our fractions, we multiply straight across. So we will actually get 2 times cosine, give me a second, 2 cosine over sine. Well, we've seen cosine over sine before. That's the ratio identity for cotangent. Therefore, our answer will be 2 cotangent. And that is your answer. You are simplified at this point. You have just a single number and a single trig identity, or a trig function, so you are good. You're finished at that point. All right, so even though we've done all the work on one side and we've gotten it simplified down, we need to now go back and fill in the reasons. These reasons will actually help you guys out when you go back and study, because then instead of just having all the math, you have what you did from each step. Well, our first reason in this is going to be the given. Well, it's basically, what did the problem give you? It's the very first line. This is always going to be your given. So this is given. The next thing we ask ourselves, what did we do from this line, from this to this? What operation did we do? Well, in this case, the only thing we did is we changed cosecant to 1 over sine, and everything else stayed the same. So my reason here is going to be reciprocal identity. And of course, you know I can't spell, so it's going to be RECP, period, for reciprocal identity. The next step, all we did is we just simply added our fractions, because we did 1 over sine plus 1 over sine, which gave us 2 over sine. So that is just addition. I'm not real picky if you write out addition or leave the symbols, because these really aren't 2-column proofs that we're doing, but I want you to justify or give me the reason from one step to the next. Well, our next step, what we did from right here to here, is that we multiplied our fractions. So this is nothing more than multiplication. Now once we've done that, from here, from 2 cosine over sine to 2 cotangent, we use our ratio identity. This way you can justify each step that you've done to actually get down to 2 cotangent. All right, number 4, letter B. The problem itself is cosecant minus tangent times cosine. Now, we're still going to go in after we simplify it and put in all of our reasons, but it's going to be easier to put your reasons in after you go through and simplify, because sometimes you might have to erase and you don't want to have to keep erasing over different places. So let's just start. Our very first step is to change things in terms of sine and cosine. Well, cosecant is the reciprocal identity of 1 over sine. And of course, we're going to do our subtraction. Tangent, the ratio identity, is going to be sine over cosine. And of course, this is going to be times cosine. And go ahead and put it over 1 because everything's a fraction. From here, we just simply do our order of operations. Well, we're going to do parentheses first. Please excuse my exponents. Then we're going to multiply and divide. So we do have multiplication right here. So we need to multiply first before we subtract. When we multiply fractions, we multiply straight across. Conveniently, our cosines cancel. This leaves us 1 over sine minus sine over 1. Now, I've made a video earlier on how you can actually add and subtract fractions, but this is where you actually have to use that procedure because we don't have not really any numbers to deal with. These are going to be like sines and cosines and ones, and sometimes we might have some numbers. So what we have to do is we're going to have to subtract these fractions. We're going to multiply our bottoms. That's going to be our new bottom. Sine times 1 is sine. We're going to multiply from bottom right to top left. That's going to be your first term. 1 times 1 is 1. And then multiply from bottom left to top right. Sine times sine is sine squared. My operator right in the middle is a minus, so I bring my minus down. So now we have now subtracted 1 over sine minus sine over 1. It actually equals 1 minus sine squared over sine. Now, 1 minus sine squared is a Pythagorean identity. That is cosine squared over sine. On your sheets with your identities, I had you write all those different versions of manipulation for the Pythagorean. So you can go look at your Pythagorean identity. You'll find 1 minus sine squared equals cosine squared, and you can substitute it out at that point. From here, cosine squared over sine simply means I have cosine, two cosines on top, cosine, cosine, and one sine on bottom, a sine, and I can really write that as times 1, so you can see there's two different fractions here. It's actually two different fractions. Well, cosine over sine is nothing more than, cotangent it's nothing more than cotangent, and cosine over 1 is nothing more than cosine, and we are done simplifying. I'm having a hard time writing today. Cotangent over cosine. Now, let's go back in and fill in our reasons. Quite a few steps here. Well, my first reason, just like we're going to start all the time, you have to write your problem down. So this is going to be your given. And then from step 1 to step 2, what we actually did is we use our ratio. We use our ratio and our reciprocal. When we did cosecant to 1 over sine, and tangent to sine over cosine, we actually used our ratio and reciprocal. So we do ratio and reciprocal. Now for step 3, we went from here to here. What we actually did is we multiplied and simplified fractions. So we multiplied, and simplified. Now, on our next step, what we actually did is we subtracted fractions. So we did subtraction. That's how we went from here to here, is we had to actually do subtraction. We subtracted fractions. From here to here, we actually used the Pythagorean identity. Pyth. And then we just simply rewrote cosine squared over sine. So I just rewrite. And then our very last step, all we used was the ratio identity. So this allows you to justify all of your answers. And that is letter B. All right, letter C, number 4, letter C. Our actual problem is, change my color to black there. Sine minus cosecant, all divided by cotangent. That's going to be my given. Now our first step is to go ahead and turn everything into sines and cosines. Well, sine's already there, so we're going to leave it as sine minus, cosecant, let's put sine over 1 because we know we need fractions. minus cosecant is 1 over sine, all over, and cotangent is cosine over sine. These are our reciprocal identities and our ratio identity. Now I know it looks a lot uglier, but to me it looks better because everything's in terms of sines and cosines. First thing we have to do is we are going to have to subtract the top. We need to get a single fraction on top of a single fraction. So we're going to multiply our bottoms. We're going to multiply up. We're going to multiply up. Quite similar to the last problem that we just did, however it'll be in a different order. So we'll actually get sine squared minus 1 over sine, and that is all over cosine over sine. I know it looks ugly, but it's really not that bad. Now, this part right here, if you look at your Pythagorean identity sheet, you'll see that we have negative cosine squared equals sine squared minus 1. So we actually replace it. So when we replace it, we're going to get negative cosine squared over sine over cosine over sine. Now I ran out of room on the bottom here, so let me go ahead and move this. Give me a second. All right, so I got that moved. Now, from here, we can do the rainbow method I've showed you guys. It's division of fractions. So my new top is going to be negative cosine squared times sine all over sine times cosine. You hear the lovely bell in the background there. Well, my sines cancel, one of my cosines cancel, and that leaves me my final answer as negative cosine. Now we can go in and fill in the reasons. I'll leave that up to you guys if you want to go in and fill in the reasons. It's the same as before. You just go from step to step and get your reasons.